Recent developments have put the famous game Resident Evil in a quite solid position overall. After perhaps reaching its artistic nadir with Resident Evil 6, the 7th edition of the Resident Evil series, which was released in 2017, offered a refreshing comeback to the series' horror origins while also redefining itself with a first-person viewpoint. Since then, Capcom has released a remake of Resident Evil 2 that is fantastically good, as well as a competent take on the game's sequel that is more significant than the original. But guess what? A mod created by Praydog that incorporates virtual reality and motion controls makes the horrors in Resident Evil Village much more frightening. Although enthusiasts of the PC modding community continue to experiment with various peripherals for several Resident Evil titles, Capcom has been exploring the field of virtual reality on its own. For example, Resident Evil 7 included virtual reality gameplay options for Sony's PlayStation VR platform. And in October of last year, a virtual reality port of RE4 was released for the Oculus Quest 2. Strangely, a patch added identical compatibility to the Mercenaries mode of the game a few weeks after it was initially released. Moreover, he recently published a new Resident Evil Village mod, and it lets players experience the terrifying events that take place in the outlying village while using virtual reality headsets. The build in question also has support for motion control, which incorporates elements such as hand tracking, physical combat assaults, room-scale mobility, in which Ethan moves while wearing the headset, and physical weapon pointing. With VR, you will experience a whole new world that demonstrates how much more unsettling Resident Evil Village can become when a few additional peripherals are added to the mix. Now we have Resident Evil Village VR, which comes with a logo that is stylized in a manner to let you know that this is actually Resident Evil 8, even if Capcom isn't directly labeling it as such. This will let you know that the game you are playing is the 8th edition in the Resident Evil series. It continues on from where 7 left off, with the same first-person perspective and Ethan Winters as its remarkable protagonist. Village VR, on the other hand, is more of a first-person take on Resident Evil 4, which many consider to be the series' prime sequel. Enjoying the video so far and curious to know about other VR games, click on the I button and watch one of our other videos on best games available on Oculus Quest. Although Resident Evil 7 echoed the slow-burning housebound terror of the first game, Village VR is more of a fast-paced horror. The events of Resident Evil 7 have just been a few years in the past when Village begins. It would appear that horror games are at the core of a great deal of what makes virtual reality so fascinating. It shouldn't come as a surprise that Resident Evil Village looks to have similarly transitioned well to the more immersive form of play, given the favorable feedback around the VR versions of both Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 4, which is why it is still worth mentioning. Even though Resident Evil 7 and Village both use the same camera perspective and have similar controls, the atmosphere of Village is very different from the very beginning itself. Instead of cautiously exploring a spooky and evocative scene that gradually unveils the evil that lies beneath, you are plunged immediately into the midst of the action and are left to fight for yourself against monstrous enemies. You may recall that this is precisely how Resident Evil 4 began. The comparisons between Village and Resident Evil 4 go beyond the game's fast-paced beginning and the rural European background of the former. The emphasis is significantly more on action than it was in Resident Evil 7, and you'll frequently find yourself engaging in combat with many foes at once. When playing on VR, you'll notice that there have also been a lot of improvements made to the game's overall quality of life by Capcom. These improvements range from a shortcut that allows you to break boxes without enabling your knife to a completely revamped inventory management system, which differentiates crafting materials from everything else, providing you with more space and an increased ability to fire weapons. After the overwhelming popularity of Resident Evil 7, I was a little taken aback by the aesthetic change that Resident Evil Village exhibited. When you're making a game about monstrously mutated creatures that are the result of mysterious bioweapon experiments, you can only get about as grounded as you possibly can. But people praised that game for its comparatively solid comeback to survival horror, and it received a lot of applause for doing so. It was the first time in a while that a Resident Evil game would actually make you worry what may be around the next corner. And the location was scary and horrifying. The scenario was largely concentrated on a terrible, foul-smelling home in a Louisiana bayou, and it was the main focus of the game. The concept is mostly ignored for the majority of Village, with the exception of a few memorable scenes. You can explore the town during the day by solving environmental puzzles, which will allow you to access further regions of the game world. The Resident Evil Village is a rather open location. It can be a little difficult to navigate initially, but it is not extremely vast, and eventually its main job will be to act as a center from which you set out to take down 4 tyrants who are enthralled to a mysterious person known as Mother Miranda. The first of these locales, and certainly the most memorable, is Castle Dimitrescu. It is here that you will encounter the 9-foot-tall Lady Dimitrescu, who will pursue you around the castle in a manner comparable to that of other Resident Evil antagonists, such as Nemesis. When you play the Village VR, the gameplay of Castle Dimitrescu is rather traditional for Resident Evil, and the game quickly falls into a comfortable routine consisting of closed doors, straightforward puzzles, and gradual advancement as you discover more of the area. This loop is as rewarding as it has ever been, but in contrast to Resident Evil 7, when the emphasis was more on horror, I found that it was rarely terrifying in this game due to the increased emphasis on action. When you use your shotgun this frequently, there is a limit to the amount of stress that may build up in your body. This will continue to be the case for the most majority of the game's remaining portion as you explore new regions that, for the most part, act as dramatic preludes to showdowns with other followers of Miranda. If you are enjoying it this far, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. Also press the bell icon as well to never miss our future uploads. When it comes to such showdowns, one of the most noteworthy upgrades that Village offers over its predecessor is the increased difficulty of the boss battles. The majority of the fights in Resident Evil 7 were difficult and left players unsatisfied. But Capcom has accepted spectacle to great success for the game's most important confrontations. At the very least, they are remembered, which is a step in the right direction, even if they aren't particularly enormous obstacles or difficult brain puzzles. The atmosphere of Village is there at times, to be sure, but that is not the primary focus of the game. There are significant portions of the game that are played out in a fashion that is analogous to that of a first-person shooter. The puzzles are, for the most part, easy to solve, and you won't frequently find yourself without the resources to defend yourself against the foes. There is nothing quite as provocative as the worst abuses of 5 or 6, and there is one interaction in specific that leans heavily into psychological horror. But there are times when Village makes us feel more like something from the Metro series than any of its own predecessors did. This is especially true during the game's final act. Naturally, Resident Evil 4 was contentious in its own time, with some long-standing series fans criticizing its similar turn away from survival horror. This was one of the reasons why the game was so controversial. It is now widely regarded as one of the most groundbreaking action games in the history of gaming. Village, on the other hand, does not have much going for it. Although it draws heavily from Resident Evil 4, it is still mostly an evolution of Resident Evil 7, and the end result is simply yet another amazing Resident Evil mashup. Even though Capcom doesn't want to label it a part of the series, I consider Resident Evil Village VR to be a worthy addition to the canon of sequential editions in the franchise, and it's an excellent game that's worth playing. But because it plainly combines aspects of episodes 7 and 4, which are, respectively, 2 of the most significant retcons in the series' history, it seems less momentous than either of those episodes. As a consequence of this, the way you feel about it is probably going to boil down to how you feel about Resident Evil as a whole. It's likely that you'll enjoy Village if you're drawn to the game's bizarre cast of characters and intricate maze-like stage layouts. You may find yourself dissatisfied, though, if you were hoping that Episode 7 would usher in a radical new course for the series. However, if you are in for a superb action-packed monster-smashing game, my friend, I can guarantee you will absolutely love it. And with that said, we have reached the end of today's video. What are your thoughts on this one? Let us know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video so that it encourages us to bring more amazing and interesting videos to you. That said, thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.